it's this idea where he's not going to change his mind about you. And you can say no and walk away from him for 20 years. But when you come back, he's going to say, where were we? All right, time for a mailbag. Dude, I've been so busy this week. Like, I have been working on my book. I have been recording. I've been hanging out with family, playing some disc golf, only one time, twice, 3 times. So I have been busy, tired. Excited. We're going to do a mailbag segment today. It's actually, it's another question on the once saved, always saved subject. Recording? Good. Shirt. Got my mic on. Mailbag. You're going to like this one. Predestination. All right, let's go after it. Ready? Good afternoon. Wherever you're at. Could be morning, could be evening. Want to do a mailbag today, mailbag segment. And I've been getting a ton of emails. Most of them very polite, not always agreement, but they're asking questions. And so I'm just going through and answering them. One of the mailbag questions, and I was actually asked, you probably should read this rather than summarizing it. And that wasn't from one of the mailbag people, but just a conversation I had with somebody. And sometimes they include information that, with family or whatever that I can't put in. I'm sorry. I'm tired. But this is a mailbag segment, and it was on the subject of predestination, the once saved, always saved stuff. And they said, will you teach on that? And I said, I would love to. And so let's run through this today and let's look at it. And I want to start off by looking in Ephesians. The term predestination is from the Greek word pronounced prurizo. I think it's pretty close. Plurizo. And it's used like 4, 5, 6 times in the New Testament. And it pretty much always has the same idea. It's translated predestined, decided beforehand, or destined. That's the idea. And it's taken oftentimes, and I don't want to say hijacked, but it's taken oftentimes by people to use in defense of a doctrine. And when they use that, they take it out of context. Because this is not used in terms of honestly, in terms of a salvation kind of a deal. It's oftentimes associated with judgment. It's associated with what we have in Christ that can't be taken away. That it's not this idea that, it's kind of like a salvation kind of a thing. So I just want to run through a couple of these with you. And one of my favorites is in Ephesians. Chapter 1, he uses the term predestined twice. He uses it in verse 5, and he uses it in verse 11. Before we get into all this, hey, again, you can like and subscribe or share this stuff. If you have any more questions, drop them in our mailbag segment. Check out our website. We got some books that are coming out, some merch, t-shirt kind of stuff you may be interested in. And any questions you have, drop them and we'll go after them just like we did this one. All right, predestination. So Paul opens up his letter, introduction in verses 1 and 2, his typical deal. And then he comes into this whole section really from verse 3 all the way down through, definitely chapter 2, verse 10. And it's all about what we have being included in Jesus, like being included. Once you're saved, you're in Jesus. These are the things that we have. And one of those things is an adoption as his sons through Jesus Christ. And sonship, probably should go and explain this, but real quickly, but sonship is not just like for guys. Sonship is the rights of a firstborn son. Jesus, who's the only begotten Son, we were created to have the relationship with the Father, both male and female created, to have a relationship with the Father that Jesus had with the Father. Where He's seated, we are seated, male and female. The rights that He has, we have. The authority He walked in, we get to walk in. The language He used to talk to the Father, we get to talk to the Father. So sonship, when sons is used, that's the terminology explained. That's how we understand it. Okay. So He says, we have been adopted as sons, but He uses the term predestination. So let's look beginning at verse 4 and read into verse 5 and find our term predestined. So verse 4 says, "For He chose us in Him before the creation of the world to be holy and blameless in His sight. In love, He predestined us to be adopted as His sons through Jesus Christ in accordance with His pleasure and will." So He predestined us for sonship. He predestined us to be adopted as sons. So before the foundation of the world, He predestined us into sonship. Like, in other words, there's no other option. Okay. This is what I have ordained for you to be. I have planned for it. I've calculated. I'm not changing my mind on it. Sonship. That's the only option you have. Let's look at the word predestined. The word predestined, if you were to actually do a word study on it, is, again, translated in a number of different ways. The English Strong's lexicon, enhanced Strong's lexicon, which is a super standard, for all word studies across denominational boundaries, translates predestination 4 times. They translated determined before once and ordained once. To predetermine, decide beforehand, in the New Testament of God decreeing from eternity. To foreordain or appoint beforehand. That's how the word is used. And again, he has several different applications for it. The way you understand predestination is that before something happens, God says, "This is my will for this." I'm preordaining it. I'm predestining it. Now, that's when we talk about God's will, is a really interesting thing because we have free will. Like, God created us as beings to say no to Him. God desires everyone to be saved. Not everybody's going to be saved. We can say no. Okay. So what's this predetermined, predestination kind of language all about? The way I love to describe it, think about this. It's this, and when I teach on this, I use a board, a marker board, but you draw a circle, okay? And let's call that circle the predestination circle. This is what God preordained. This is all the stuff here in this chapter. This is blessing. This is glory. This is safety. This is rewards. These are all the things God says, I've predestined you. I have literally reached out and said, listen, this is what I have in store for you. This is what I'm going to bless. This is what I'm going to reward. And He also predestines regarding stuff that He's not going to bless outside the circle. God is not going to bless murder. He's not going to bless molestation, rape, killing, lying, stealing, go on, whatever it is, okay? He's not going to bless coveting. He's not going to bless idolatry, okay? All the things that God's not going to bless are outside this circle. God's not going to bless us. He's predestined those things that He's not going to bless. He describes this in John chapter 15. It's going to be like stuff it's worthless. It's going to be thrown into the fire. Okay. It's going to be judged. So there's predestination for things inside the circle, all the good stuff. Okay. This is what I've preordained for those who love me. I predestined for you to be right here. Did not predestine for you to be right here. Now, if you choose to be here, I've preordained a place for this stuff. It's called hell. But I've preordained for people who respond to me to be into here. So the idea of predestination is not a control that takes your free will away. Predestination is how it's used in this passage. He like before the world began, he says, the only option I'm giving you, I'm God, I'm sovereign, I'm in charge. I've predestined you to be a son in my kingdom and have these benefits. If you don't want to be a son and you rebel and you step out of that circle, this is the stuff that you're going to be in. I'm not blessing this. And I've predetermined and preordained for these kinds of a place for those people to go. But before the foundation of the world, I've ordained you to be here, and I'm going to bless what's here. So before the world began, he's like, listen, I've included you, and I've got plans for you. Like in my Father's house, dude, I go to prepare a place for you. It's what Jesus says. Like, dude, he said that for Judas. When he said that statement, I go to prepare a place for you. You is plural. It includes all of them. Judas opted out. So predestination is not God's going to trump my will, or even or kind of like take away my ability to choose to walk in transgression. He's not going to take that ability away. So predestination is what God has predetermined and what God expects of us. Like he is judge and jury. This is what I'm going to do. And you don't have a choice. If you're going to follow me, it's the Jonah thing. God comes to Jonah and says, listen, got a plan for your life. I want you to go to the Ninevites. I want you to go to Nineveh and preach. And Jonah's like, I ain't doing it. God's like, oh yeah, you are. If you're going to serve me, you don't have to. You don't have to. You can lay in the belly of a well and die. But if you respond, you're going to Nineveh. Said the same thing to Jeremiah, the prophet. God comes to Jeremiah and says, hey, I want you to go and say this and say that, the leaders of Israel. Jeremiah's like, I can't do that. God's like, here's the deal. If you're mine, you're going to do that. Same thing to Moses. I can't speak. Yeah, you are. I've created you for this moment. You're going to go. So it's this idea where he's not going to change his mind about you. And you can say no and walk away from him for 20 years. But when you come back, he's going to say, where were we? If you were called to ministry and you're like, I'm not going to go minister. You go walk off, do your thing for 20 years and come back. He's going to be like, go to Bible college. I haven't changed my mind about you, because God's in the business of preordaining. So that's in verse 5, and you go down a few more verses, down in verse 11, it's the same thing. In him we were also chosen, having been predestined according to the plan of him who works out everything in conformity with the purpose of his will. So he's with his whole will and design for children and the covenant. He's ordained and predestined, set things in motion. This is going to happen. I've included you. This is the only option. If you don't want to, you can rebel, and there's a place for you. But this is the only option you have. I'm not going to budge on that. That's the idea of predestination. That's that term. Everywhere it's used in the scriptures, that's how it's used. And you can go study it yourself. It is not a free will take away. It is not a take away my choice and make decisions for me that I don't make. That's not that term. That term is God ordaining, God setting aside and calling and saying, I want you to respond to this. This is what I have for you. And that's the sovereignty of God expect. I'm not giving you a choice on this. You don't have to respond, but I've predestined you to be right here. And if you don't want to be right here, there's only one other place to go. That's the idea. So I hope that makes sense. Again, got a mailbag question. You can ask it and I'll do my best to answer it. Appreciate you. God bless.